Change of plans. CNN is reporting today that the White House has halted plans to house thousands of migrants, the so-called worst of the worst, in a giant camp at Guantanamo in Cuba. According to CNN, they say this change of plans has come, quote, amid concerns over conditions for detainees. Concerns over conditions. It may be true that the folks running Donald Trump's made-for-TV mass deportation operation are worried about the conditions at Guantanamo. Could be. Or it could be that the epic logistical complications and massive expense of trying to set up a pointless diversion to Guantanamo just so they can make propaganda videos about it and post them on social media, maybe the embarrassment of having been caught out, already not sending the so-called worst of the worst, but instead sending people there with no criminal record at all. I mean, whatever the complication of factors that have come together to crash this Trump plan as well, just 5 weeks in, apparently, per CNN's reporting tonight, they have decided that this Guantanamo gambit, this too, is just not worth the trouble. But don't worry, there is a new and even more expensive and inexplicable and morally and legally disastrous idea right behind it in line. Politico headline today, quote, Trump allies circulate mass deportation plan calling for, quote, processing camps and a private citizen army. Quote, a group of prominent military contractors, including former Blackwater CEO Eric Prince, of course, has pitched the Trump White House on a proposal to carry out mass deportations through a network of processing camps on military bases, a private fleet of 100 airplanes, and a, quote, small army of private citizens empowered to make arrests. The blueprint carries an estimated price tag of $25 billion and recommends a range of aggressive tactics to rapidly deport 12 million people before the 2026 midterms. Quote, it's not clear if the president has seen the plan, which has been circulating among Trump allies since December. Eric Prince's partner in the proposal tells Politico they haven't been contacted by or had discussions with the government yet. The proposal suggests deputizing 10,000 private citizens, giving them expedited training and the same federal law enforcement powers of immigration officials, including the right to arrest other people. So, $25 billion to have Blackwater set up a private army and a private air force in the United States that answers just to Trump and that rounds up people and puts them in camps. What could possibly go wrong? This seems like a totally well thought out concept and definitely one that'll get really careful consideration if they're going to go through with it, right? Joining us now is Congressman Jason Crow of Colorado. He's a member of the Armed Services and Intelligence Committees. Earlier this month, after the Trump administration said a military base in his district would be used to detain migrants, Congressman Crow personally went to that base and got assurances that it would not be used for that purpose. Congressman Crow, it's a real pleasure to have you with us here tonight. Thank you for making time.
Thanks, Rachel.
I want to talk to you about some of what seems to me like some real crazy town stuff that's being proposed when it comes to immigration enforcement. Before we get to that, though, I do just have to ask you about this vote that just happened in the House within the last hour. It seems that your Republican colleagues very narrowly did approve their budget plan. Our viewers watching tonight, what should people know about what it was that was voted on tonight and what the consequences of this might be?
Well, the major consequences, they've passed a bill that's not paid for, that gives massive tax breaks to corporations and billionaires and does it on the backs of regular Americans, mainly by slashing their health care and gutting our Medicaid program. Right? They are trying to use a tactic of burden shifting onto the states, saying that the states should pay for this, but they know the states can't pay for it. So they know that much of this coverage will go belly up for folks. So it is a terrible, terrible bill. You know, there was a lot of drama in D.C. leading up to this vote. You know, are people going to hold out? Are people going to fight for their constituents? Never underestimate the willingness of House Republicans to fold and capitulate when Donald Trump tells them to jump. And that's exactly what happened tonight.
Do you expect that this version that just passed the House, this resolution that was adopted, will be ultimately the version that the Senate votes on and ultimately the version that the Republicans try to make law?
I do think so, right? They have the votes in the House. This is the supposed one big beautiful bill that Donald Trump wants, which of course is chock full of his giveaways to his billionaires, donors, and his cronies, and does it on the backs of everyday Americans. I mean, listen, a couple of days ago I went to one of my public health clinics in my district, and I sat there while I listened to people talk about how if they lose their Medicaid coverage, their ability to pay for their prescription drugs, that people will die, that their family members literally cannot afford insulin, will not be able to afford to pay their rent and their prescription drugs. They'll lose homes, they'll lose their health. This is absolutely catastrophic. We cannot underestimate the deep impact this is going to have, and it's going to be the worst, actually, if you look at around the country. It's going to be the worst in rural areas and red areas, right? So a lot of the people who voted for Donald Trump to make their life better are going to be impacted in a catastrophic way by this bill.
What the Trump administration most wants people in rural areas and red areas to think of when they think about this new administration is immigration enforcement. This is the thing that they want to be, the thing that they are most known for, and that they have put the most effort into in terms of public-facing media. And I think some people would sort of credibly argue that they've made a lot of propaganda about what it is they are doing on immigration enforcement. I mentioned the CNN reporting earlier that the Trump administration appears to be abandoning its plan to send people to Guantanamo after having a little flurry of activity around that, in which they used to create a bunch of propaganda. Now they're not going to do it anymore. There's also now reporting in Politico that they're considering a $25 billion program to privatize immigration enforcement and have essentially mercenaries do it. Some of the language and the planning and the activity around this thus far seems almost surreal. From the vantage point of your district in Colorado, what do you make of the reality of what they're doing and what they're trying to sell their voters on what they're doing?
Well, there's a couple of common strands to a lot of things that the Trump administration is doing. First, if there is a way to privatize something and to pad the pockets of their billionaire donors and their buddies, they will do it, right? Even if it's more expensive, they will do it. And this, the scheme to privatize immigration enforcement to private mercenaries, and it has the added bonus for them of hiding things, right? They like to hide things. They like to funnel money to their friends and to large corporations. So that is generally what happens in a lot of these cases with the Trump administration. But the impact here, let's just paint a picture for Aurora and for Colorado, right? A lot of folks who I even know who voted for Donald Trump said their number one issue is the cost of living. They couldn't afford groceries, they couldn't afford rent, and that is what they were hoping that Donald Trump would deliver for them. They are doing nothing to address that issue. In fact, to the contrary, the two ways to make the cost of living that go up the quickest would be to impose unnecessary or broad tariffs and to threaten deportation of vast swaths of the workforce, because we already have a labor shortage, which all of the companies and small businesses and manufacturers in my district tell me that if this moves forward and they lose the workforce, prices will go up instantly overnight. So they're actually going to make the problem worse, just from an economic perspective. That's not even talking about the moral component of taking children and families, ripping them apart, including U.S. citizen children in some cases, according to Tom Homan, and deporting these folks.
Congressman Jason Crow of Colorado, decorated veteran Army Ranger, somebody who knows of what he speaks on these matters, particularly the proposal to use military force around these things. Congressman, I really appreciate you taking time to talk with us tonight. Come back anytime. We'd love to have you back.
Thanks, Rachel.
All right, much more news ahead tonight. Stay with us.